Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Welcome back to episode, I can't even keep track anymore, maybe like 12 of Behind the Minbar. This time we're joined by our dear guest, Samahat al-Sheikh Mohammed Al-Hilli, joining us from the UK. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikhna.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. It's a privilege and an honor to be joining you and to seeing this beautiful studio and to take part. Alhamdulillah. So
We
thanks for having me.
thank you for coming. We finally got you. Alhamdulillah.
Finally.
Inshallah, this we're wrapping up 3 nights of Fatimiyya Majalis, and inshallah, it's not the last we see of you.
Inshallah.
We look
My
forward,
privilege.
inshallah, to seeing
Look
you
forward to seeing you
more
more.
often and sooner, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Bismillah ta'ala. So, Sheikhna, I have in front of me here these little Salat al-Layl pamphlets that you graciously provided for us. Also, the how to teach your child, how to help your child love Salah. So this is by Noor Islamic Education. Is that your organization or something you're involved in? Can you just explain the dynamic?
Yes, so Alhamdulillah, I've been a director, executive director of this organization since its inception. And it's an organization that seeks to spread the teachings of the religion of Islam from the Quran and the Ahl al Bayt. There are digital means of delivering this message and also printed. So we're looking always at avenues and areas in which new innovative ideas can be utilized or to fill gaps in the community. And that's primarily the goal. But Alhamdulillah, it's tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's so much that can be done, but this is kind of the start.
MashaAllah, like I know you guys from your reels that you upload a lot very frequently. Where you're giving ahkam, like
Yeah.
ahkam, what to do in this situation, is this halal, and so on and so forth. I find that is beneficial for a lot of people. But this book specifically, it's not just like a salah guide. Put your hands here, put your arms here, put your forehead on the floor. There's more to it, right?
Yes, I mean, regarding the reels, Alhamdulillah, it's been so successful. It's taking me by surprise because initially when I started it, I thought, you know what, let's see how it goes. But people are very much in tune with short clips. And obviously, it's supported on platforms like YouTube in the sense that they do want these kind of productions. Sometimes, I'm taken by surprise by people's comments and positive feedback. Once somebody came to me and said in Ziyara, I love your shorts. And it took me like a few seconds to recognize he meant the right thing. Yes. And I said, okay. Oh, you mean the YouTube shorts? Yes. Thank you so much. So I think ultimately it's been something that people enjoy watching because it's quite quick bite size. This publication, alhamdulillah, it's very recent, and the idea behind it is that salah, of course, is the foundation, the pillar of our religion, and many a times it's being taught perhaps in a forceful manner, or parents are struggling. They're struggling with the upbringing of their children in this day and age. So many things are happening before them, they need help. So one of the ways in which you can help them is how to make salah something that is loved by the children, something that they enjoy doing. And so it provides some tips, some guidelines, some instructions from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam's do's and don'ts, which I think are critical for marriage, for parenting, for people to get as much support as they can in this journey towards getting it right.
Centum. Yeah, and I feel like it's mainly because we're on a frontier, our parents, or some people, their parents, grandparents arrived in the West, in these North America, Europe, and no one's really had this experience before. There's no advice really on how to live in the West until, maybe like Samahat Sistani, he came out with a code of practice for Muslims in the West, so it's a struggle when, like in Iraq and Muslim countries, people organize their day, like work day or whatever is organized around salah. The bathrooms are made for accommodating wudu, مثلا. Whereas here, that's always been a struggle, like at school, especially in the winter months here in Canada when yani, Dhuhr salah ends, like sunset is so early, and you have schools, you're in university, you always just have to sneak in salah somewhere. And it's always been something difficult, but alhamdulillah, now in this, like the last 10 years, it's become like a fairly commonplace to have prayer rooms, to have facilities for that.
That's right. But I think salah is indicative of generally the relationship that people have with their creator, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and especially children growing up, the image of God that's given to them. Sometimes in different cultures, because parents are desperate to get their kids to practice, they kind of present this very kind of rigid, fearful kind of attitude towards their children, where they think of God as this punishing Lord who will really get them in trouble if they don't do what they're supposed to
rely
do.
on fear.
So their relationship is always like, oh, I've just got to do it because I'll be punished. It's not a relationship based on the love and connection with Allah subhanahu
It's
wa ta'ala.
fear-based.
So I remember one person saying, you know what, I've clocked the best way to teach my child how to pray. And we said to him, how? He said, barbecue chicken. So I said, barbecue chicken? What, do you give them chicken for when they pray? He said, la. What do you? He said, I tell them, if you don't pray, Allah will barbecue you like you barbecue the chicken. So, to that level where people are actually giving examples of how Rabb al-Alameen punishes people to get them to be scared to perform their duties. And I think in this day and age, this is not necessarily going to work. Our children need to have that connection with their Lord, to be able to somehow feel His presence, feel His love, also love Him, and also approach their life and their practices with that passion, with that commitment. So that only comes by parents leading by example for this, but also answering their questions, somehow figuring out, okay, where does God sit in their lives? We just had a wonderful Q&A here, and that little girl who asked the final question about why has God created us? So I know maybe, I don't know if you agree, but maybe the attitude of some parents is to their child, don't ask these questions, these are irrelevant, or because they can't answer them, they'll just push them away, right? So it's so important that we embrace these questions. And actually, if we don't know the answer, we get help and engage. It's a wonderful discussion to have amongst the family.
Those questions. Yeah.
To research and maybe make it as a homework activity for the kids as well.
Ahsantum. So I'd like to tell all our viewers to check out Noor Islamic Education, especially these recent publications, how to help your child love Salah, and also like the little Salat al pamphlets, and they have so many other things. Of course, I think everyone knows or follows Noor Islamic Education.
Oh, I don't think so, but we hope and pray that people can follow.
Or they
of course,
follow
it's a charity.
you and then they see it.
It's not a money-making exercise at all. In fact, it's all for the sake of Allah. We want as many people to be able to help as well, to support, to give ideas, anything that we can offer for the community. We're more than happy to welcome. Alhamdulillah.
Santum. And to double back on the subject of reels that you mentioned, and you mentioned something tonight in the Q&A session. You mentioned this AWA, or sleep while awake.
Yes.
Are you finding that like the rise of reels, short form content, the diminished attention span that people have, is it affecting your kind of ability to convey the message of Ahlul Bayt or convey a message on the minbar in your lectures? Have you adjusted in any way?
It's a great question. And I think I'm a believer that we're going through another pandemic at the moment. I call it the distraction pandemic. What's happened is since COVID and even before, with the rise of technology, gadgets, today we can't do without our phones, our iPads, everything else that keeps on sending us these notifications and notices, and somehow we're always distracted. So yes, for sure, I think in today's world, we are more prone to have less concentration. So you know what? I applaud those who sit there for an hour listening to a majlis. I think it's not easy to be able to focus. Although studies have shown that out of the hour, they're only listening to 40% of it. And out of this 40%, they're only understanding 20%. So I have that in my mind when I'm talking. But what I've now realized is that it's now more about the recording being there on YouTube or anywhere else rather than just the audience. Because you're sitting and you're thinking, okay, it's important that the audience understands and they are also paying attention. So you try your best, for example, by throwing in sometimes a humorous anecdote or sometimes a story or raising the voice. These are styles in public speaking. You've got to do that
To keep people
to keep
engaged.
people engaged, or to say, listen, what do you think? Or, there are speakers today who are also engaging the audience by asking them questions and actually wanting the answer during the majlis. I tried that this year in the month of Ramadan because I think it works in Ramadan better than Fatimiyya Arba'in or Muharram, because those majalis where there is masa'ib or it's a special time of the year, people are not necessarily ready for that kind of interactive approach. But in the month of Ramadan, sometimes if you have a lecture, which is 20 minutes, half an hour, depending if it's before iftar, people are really weak. After iftar, they're really full. I don't know. You can never win in Shahr Ramadan.
Yeah.
You can never know what time is the best time for giving a majlis. But then if you engage people, for example, by asking them certain questions or expecting an answer, perhaps that might be one way to keep them focused and to keep them interested. The other thing is, of course, the topics that are chosen, the nature of the points that are being presented. Majalis are limited because you can't always go in depth because you have such a wide range of audience members, so they may switch off as well if it's something that goes above their head.
Yeah, definitely. In Muharram, we also had. It's funny, we had like competing testimonies where one person would say, "This is too advanced for me. It's too academic. Can't understand." When another person's like, "Oh, I've heard this before," or "I know this is simple stuff." They're talking about the exact same thing. So yeah, it's like it's hard to find that balance, between the whole audience's interests, trying to put it all on a scale.
I would still say, though, that the majalis and the minbar, as this is podcast is known as a blessed, inshallah, behind the minbar. I'd say that it's important that there is a structure to the majlis, and that it's not a wishy-washy, I call it salawati majlis, in that I have seen some, God bless them, khutaba, I have asked them, or others have asked them, what's your topic? They're like, wallah, I'll sit there and Allah Kareem, whatever Allah, I'll just mention a few things here and there. Hey, this, that, and then you finish and you think, wow, okay, that was a nice lecture, but I have no idea what he talked about.
Ask someone immediately, what was it about? They'll just stare blankly at you.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite activity after Muharram and Safar is to ask people in different communities, how was the majalis? Oh, amazing, mashallah, the khatib was just brilliant. What did he talk about? Well, I can't remember. So if you can't remember what he spoke about, surely the majlis has to not only make you feel good, but it helps you get closer to Rabbil Alameen. This is actually what Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam mentioned in the courtyard of Yazid when he wanted to speak. He said, let me speak so that it is something that is pleasing to Allah and beneficial to the people. These two criteria are very, very important. So I feel like, the minbar has a role to make sure that the knowledge that's been disseminated is actually very carefully thought out. Sometimes, personally, though, the thing that I struggle with is I choose topics which may not be possible to cover within the hour, and it involves either going above the hour, which some people feel really frustrated if it goes an hour 10 minutes. I think in the majlis yesterday it was a bit too long here, but at the same time it's you start losing people. But I feel even then, in this day and age where you have AI, where people apparently now you can ask YouTube to summarize the lecture for you. If it's a lecture whereby it's neither here or there, you will not be able to, later go back and really get the juicy content to be able to really think about and ponder. Is a majlis something for people to come and feel good about and leave, or is it something to really gain knowledge and to feel that proximity to the Ahl al-Bayt and in turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? I think it has to be both. So if it's a boring majlis where there is no creativity, there's no stories, there's no personal experiences, people can't connect. But if it's something just, dreams or stories only with no, for example, Quran or some direct relevance to people's lives, people might also feel like it's not what they've come to hear, or there are many professionals who come many people who've left, work to come and sacrifice. They need to feel it's worth the attendance. Of course, attendance of Ahl al-Bayt's majalis in itself is great. Ahyu amrana, rahimallahu man ahya amrana, revive our affairs. May Allah bless those who revive our affairs. So just by attending in itself is good. But I think we need to have a lot of discussions, and I'd love to see conferences, papers, I don't know, podcasts, exactly discussing what people generally want to see the evolution of the minbar, especially in English. We've had English majalis now maybe for 30 odd years. In the 90s it started, perhaps. There were some pioneers of English majalis. Now we're seeing, mashallah, a lot of English lecturers. So we need to somehow ask the question, okay, is it fulfilling the needs of the communities? Are there things we can perhaps try and tweak to make it even more effective? There's always a chance for reform and to improve things, for sure.
Yeah, like what are the goals of the majlis, for instance? And it's that reminds me of something you mentioned the other night in one of your lectures. I believe it was last night or the night before, where you spoke about people watching online and they see that it's a substitute to attendance in person.
Yeah.
That's a widespread issue. And I guess it comes as part and parcel with the rise of online content. Like the minbar, sitting down is one way to deliver content, but as you know very well, you've come up with another way to deliver content recently when you released your app titled Sheikh Mohammed Al-Hilli, shameless plug, App Store,
Thank you so much.
Google
A lot of
Play,
plugging going on
Sheikh
these
Mohammed
days.
Al-Hilli, hit him up, download the app, let's get it #1 trending. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So, this app, يعني, you have more than just lectures, links to your YouTube. You have the whole library of your reels. You have يعني, the daily, quizzes to keep people engaged. Is this يعني, a step that you see? Like, what led you to develop this app? يعني, it's not something many people wake up, Wallahi, I want to make an app. يعني,
Some of my colleagues, some of them respected scholars, they contacted me and said, what are you doing? And you are increasing the avenues by which people can contact you and ask questions and keeps you busier than before. I believe that one of the most important roles of a scholar, and I'm a student, inshallah, aspiring to become a scholar one day, but is to really be out there, to be connected with the people and to fill in the gaps and answer misconceptions and show any kind of support and guidelines for people to help in their daily lives as far as their faith and their aqeedah and spirituality and akhlaq is concerned. So when I was thinking about the app, I thought, you know what, alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with all these clips, and I wanted to centralize everything. A website in this day and age is not as effective. I wanted something to really keep people engaged, and also to provide them with some certain features like Qibla, like for example, live sessions whereby they can ask questions directly, stuff like that that keeps them interested on a regular basis. And I said, well, you know what, let's give it a go. Alhamdulillah, so far, by the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's been hugely successful. I'm trying to keep up with the questions. It's been 2 weeks since its release. I have about 300 questions. I've answered 150 so far. Incidentally, today I was going through some of the questions, and it's also been used by some to send their homework from school. So some of the kids, they're saying, provide evidence why God exists from the Quran, number one. Number two, and I know it's a question from an exam or something, and how so people are using it for that purpose. But alhamdulillah, inshallah, this is one avenue, and as many avenues that we can have for da'wah, for tabligh, for the sake of Allah, the better, inshallah.
Santum. Now, just to play devil's advocate here, what would you say to someone who challenges the fact that you made an app in your name as some
Self-promotion.
why would it self-promotion?
Why, very good.
Why didn't you make it Noor Islamic Education Method and under that banner or any other banner? Yani?
Fantastic. I think it's great. I love being pushed. By the way, just to mention this, I'm a very passionate advocate of feedback and comments for people to help scholars and speakers improve. Alhamdulillah, for the past 2 years, I've trialed this. After Muharram, I do an online survey where I ask people to rate and to comment on my lectures and to send suggestions and feedback. And even I, we would do random selection of one person who has sent some gifts just to support people, to encourage people to take part. So I'm very passionate, and I'd love people to give me feedback on the app or anything else that we do, the majalis, because that's the only way we can improve. So it's a very legitimate question. People might say, okay, is that something that you're trying to somehow self-promote? It's something that, is it really acceptable? And the answer to that is it depends on the intention, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, to have a personal app is more relatable to people. People have said, so far the comments from so many people across social media is that this is something they've been looking to benefit from. And it's not money making, so it's totally free. There's nothing that people have to pay, right? Alhamdulillah, my presence is there, modestly in social media. There's no need to kind of do more so-called self-promotion. I just wanted to facilitate and make it easier for people to send questions, but also to benefit from the 600 or 700 clips that I've done already. Alhamdulillah, we've done at Noor Islamic, but also to have different avenues. And, I think in the future there could be a Noor Islamic education app as well, other apps that could be out there. But, people have personal websites, they have personal, for example, directories. So this was intentionally done as personal because people are able to connect and know, okay, I know this person, so I can connect with him.
You're definitely not the first person to do it. There's a lot of, there's a few blank scholar.com, that's arising now. So seems to be the way that things are moving.
Sure.
Now, to move on to our topic of this episode, we were having an off-air debate about whether to talk about marriage or death.
Or both.
So now I've had the bright idea of talking about both.
What leads to what?
They in the Western weddings they say "till death do us part." So there is a connection there between marriage and death. One leads to the other. Seems like.
Yes. Let me ask you a question, Mahdi. What do people who go to funerals often wear? What color?
Black.
Black. What does the groom wear normally in a wedding?
Wallahi, he also wears black.
Yes. So what does that say anyway? That was
Seems like
someone.
It's the same thing.
Yes. But the bride normally wears a white dress, so that indicates a number of things.
Yeah, there's definitely like a subliminal message.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. So about marriage. So right now you spoke about it in one of your lectures recently. This Fatimiyya series. Fatimah and Ali are often seen as the perfect example of a perfect couple in the way they treated each other from their marriage till the end of it, and Sayeda Fatima's tragic martyrdom. What is the function? Like you said yesterday, that we made it a little clip of if you will want a Fatima, but you are not Ali. So, assuming that you kind of also answer this in the clip, but assuming that you can't attain these levels, and we want to emulate these figures, but they're also like it's like almost in an impractical way. Like you can't. Some of the stuff is just, she just wanted the shield as the mahar. Now they want $25,000 or there's
much more
things,
sometimes.
much more sometimes.
114 kilos of gold, stuff like that. Yes,
it's from the Quran.
$124,000 because there are 124,000 prophets, etc. Yes, yes. The mahar is another story. Yes.
So, like, how much can we actually practically learn and apply? Modern. We like to talk about it every time first of Dhul Hijjah comes around. Zawaj al-Nurain, and I want my Fatima for my Ali, whatever. Everyone's being all cute. But like what? Now you mentioned a lot in your lectures about like there are marital issues. We got a lot of questions about it in this Q&A. Like it's a problem, especially here in the West. Not that Iraq and our other home countries don't have problems, but it seems like marital problems are increasing here. So the first question, I know this is leading on a tangent a little bit, is how to begin the marriage in a healthy way. You answered this in the Q&A, but it wasn't recorded, so we can kind of answer it here in a different way for the audience.
Yeah. So it's a very valid initial point regarding people looking at the Ahl al-Bayt as ma'sumin and therefore saying, I cannot in any shape or form relate to them or connect with them because they're infallible. Just for linguistic purposes, I'm very careful to use the word infallibility, although a lot of people do use it, but in actual linguistic terms, infallibility means unable to err, which means that somebody has no ability to make a mistake.
They have no
Whereas
free will.
we believe that the Ma'sumin alayhim salam, all the prophets, Sayeda Fatimah and the Imams alayhim salam are able, but they never do, or they don't even think about it. And that's Asma. Whereas the Malaika are actually infallible. They can't sin.
They don't have the free
They
will.
don't have the free will, yeah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, وَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلْ فَمَا بَلَّغْتَ رِسَالَتَ. On the day of Ghadir, he says to the Holy Prophet, if you don't deliver the message of Ghadir, then you have not delivered the whole message of Islam, which means you had a choice. Allah wouldn't say to him, وَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلْ, if he was not able to err or disobey Allah. He was able, but he never even thought about doing that. And so, just for that purposes. But if we come to these examples, we have to realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not present them for us if we weren't able to somehow link ourselves to them in one way or another. So it's not either 0 or 100. There are always so many opportunities I can be inspired by Amir al-Mu'mineen and Sayyida Fatimah alayhi salam. And it's in accordance with my own circumstance and my own situation. There are so many ways I can figure out positive implementation of these lessons in my own life. And for sure, when it comes to the beginning of the marriage, what I want, I think most of us to think about is to keep reminding ourselves that what is it that we're getting married for? Why are we getting married anyway? What's the point? And when it came to Imam Ali alayhi salam describing Sayyida Fatima as how a person she is in marriage, he says, نِعْمَ الْعَوْنُ عَلَى طَاعَةِ اللَّهِ. What Fatima was to Ali was the best aid and support in achieving the objective of creation, which is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, the whole purpose of marriage, as we say, مَن تَزَوَّجَ فَقَدْ أَحْرَزَ نَصْفَ دِينِهِ, as the hadith of Amir al-Mu'mineen and the Holy Prophet says, you complete half of your religion. That means you have a journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, towards achieving perfection. And actually, there are riwayat that say, or encouragements from the ulama, based on these riwayat that say, have a goal before you get married, that I want to be with somebody who will get me to Jannah. And they will also be in Jannah. So you have a shared objective. And when you have this God centricity in your life, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes center stage, then when it comes to people who are interfering or thoughts that are perhaps in your mind to do something that are based on your understanding, you place God the Almighty first. I remember one of the scholars, he mentioned, actually it was rahmatullahi alayhi, Sheikh al-Diktor Wa'ili rahmatullahi alayhi. He says that once I was giving a majlis and I said in a lecture, you know, a husband and wife should seek to get to paradise together. And so he said, all of a sudden, one of the people sitting in the majlis walked out. Elderly man stood up. He looked angrily at me and he walked out of the majlis. So when I finished the majlis, I saw him outside. I said, Haji, what's the issue? What did I say? Anything wrong? He said, Shaykhana, you said me and my wife have to work for Jannah so that we are in Jannah there together? He said, yes. He said, it's been 20 years. I'm trying to get rid of her now. Shouldn't I go to Jannah together? I don't want to be with her in Jannah. I don't want to see her in Jannah. Ajib. Yani to that extent that people haven't really understood the point of marriage. They think marriage, yallah, it's halal. Therefore, I need to fulfill my needs. I need to have kids. And I'll just live for the sake of living. No. Look much more deeper. And that's an important lesson from the marriages of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, Sayeda Khadija with the Holy Prophet, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, with Ali ibn Abi Talib, with Sayyidah Fatimah, salamullahi alayhim, Imam al-Hassan with a great lady by the name of Ishaq, who was so beloved to Imam al-Hassan, Imam al-Hussein with Layla, with Shahrabanu, with Rabab, for example. Yes, Imam Zayn al-Abidin with Fatima bint al-Hassan, the daughter of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. And so all these wonderful examples within the Ahl al-Bayt, they had a primary objective. I am here to serve God. I want God to be the main focus of my relationship. Everything will fall in place afterwards.
Santum. Now, see, I was saying, like, these topics are more related than we think, this marriage and death.
100%.
As you said, it's not just a commitment for the lifetime, it's for eternity.
Yeah.
So if you make the wrong choice, it's a long
There's
time.
always, well, I mean, that's the thing.
Eternity is a long time.
No, there's always, you know, there's always hope. I mean, people think, okay, if I make the wrong choice, I'm doomed forever. No. Ideally, you know, what we need to do is work on ourselves. And, you know, if somebody has the potential to change, then they will change inspired by the other person seeking God. They will also seek God.
I challenge you. I tell some people, it's funny, like, sometimes it's the most single person that has like myself, that has the best marriage advice. So people come to me, they ask me for advice. I'm just like, yeah, I definitely know everything about this. Haven't done it myself. But I say, when you're looking for someone, don't expect them to change for you. You have to take them on face value as they are. You can't look at someone and be like, it's like a comment where they say, I can fix her.
Yes.
And what if you can't? You don't know that.
No guarantees.
There's no guarantees. So I actually disagree with. I agree that we can all always change for the better. None of us are perfect. But to take someone who's flawed in a way that it's not compatible with you, but because they look good or her father is wealthy, مثلا, you're like, you know what, I can fix her. I feel like that's kind of preposterous. Like that's my view.
It's definitely not something that is going to be successful because none of us can be so sure of themselves, and we can never change others. We can only change ourselves. Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is muqallib al-qulub, and He is the one who, of course, can change people. We can only try. But ultimately, when I'm looking for somebody, I need to make sure there is compatibility when it comes to my core values and principles. And these core values sometimes are not only faith-based. There are people out there who have the importance of family in their lives. Families meaning what? Meaning their parents, they play a central role in their lives. And then they need to find somebody who shares that with them. So they don't mind that, for example, the parents visit regularly, or they visit the parents regularly, or eventually when the parents are elderly, they might live with them. So those values, that's the compatibility, because that's when there'll be a clash if somebody doesn't believe in that whatsoever. And whether it's worth sacrificing your values to reach or to get someone to agree just because of how they look, or like you said, their wealth or their family, I don't think that's necessarily proven to be a successful plan.
Yeah, and side note, when you were mentioning Imam Hussein, I think Rasulullah as well. I mean, we know a lot of them, but when you just mentioned Imam Hussein, you mentioned 3 wives. So everyone has this Romeo and Juliet idea. You know, Ali and Fatima, Imam Ali alayhi salam never got married to another wife while he was married to Sayyidah Fatima. But, like, there's a lot of people that are like, yeah, I'm just looking for the one. But we don't have the one. We don't have the one. So how do you explain that? How do you justify the marrying for people, and especially for the Imam? They married multiple times, and of course they treated them equally and all that because of who they are.
Of course.
بس احنا مستحيل there's a person who has multiple wives that's loves them all. So who cares if he loves them all the same, as long as he treats them the same, right?
How does he treat them all the same?
In fairness, in respecting them, even if deep down he's like, this one I don't really like, but he has to treat them all the same. Show the same love.
He has to love them all exactly the same.
No, there's one he can love for her face and one he can love for her voice. Yeah, they don't, he doesn't have to love them in
Right.
the exact same
So
way.
in terms of Sharia, it's not about the love that has to be equally shared. It's the time that's spent.
Just the time.
Time and
What about
obviously what
treatment? Like, what? Yeah, that's what I
finances,
mean by
what you spend
treatment.
on her,
Yeah, yeah.
but not the emotion. It's very hard
Well,
to
that's what I was
split the
saying. I'm
emotion
like,
to
you can't split love.
But when you look at 7th century Arabia and even before and some of the practices, of course, Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Sharia is based on the wisdom of Rabbil Alameen. So it's not something that we can somehow object to. But different circumstances and different societies have different cultural tendencies and acceptable norms. In today's world, it has become even much more difficult to imagine people, of course, especially in the Western world, to be able to somehow handle or survive even marrying two, let alone four, right?
Yeah.
So, in terms of why it's there, well, there are reasons, such as, for example, in certain communities, in certain societies, there is a wide range of or high number of widows that exist, for example. And so this is there to help those widows so that they're not left without any financial help and so on and so forth. But in practical terms, in this day and age, especially in the Western world, it becomes very, very difficult to get it right. And in addition to the fact that I don't know in Canada, but in the United Kingdom, it's against the law
Yeah,
to
it's
marry
illegal.
to, yeah.
Right.
Although some people marry without registering their
Yeah.
marriage, that's another thing. But is it something that we necessarily recommend? I'm not so sure. I think we have to recognize that not everything that's halal has to be done.
And
So
not
to
everything that's
speak.
halal is wajib.
Yeah, definitely
Yeah.
not wajib, but also not something that is applicable in terms of recommendation at all times, because different societies, different circumstances, different challenges that they may actually face.
And that also applies pretty much to also the issue of the temporary marriage.
For
which is-
sure.
yeah.
Absolutely, for sure. Because I believe that temporary marriage has been abused by some
Greatly.
individuals.
And it's a big point that people use against the school of thought of Ahlul Bayt. Yani.
Yes. There is a purpose for it. It's legitimate in Islam. It's acceptable. But there are circumstances by which it's used correctly. For example, God bless the Khoja community. They use it, for example, when somebody agrees to marry someone and it's been announced that, for example, khalas, this person is with this person. Then they go through a temporary agreement, marriage, with certain conditions
Yeah.
until the aqd time. So, for example, let's say 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, so that they can go out. It's
It
halal
allows them to get to know each
to
other
get to each,
without
each
the
other.
aunties in the other room.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Because you remember, they are still non mahram without
Yeah.
a marriage. So, even though they're engaged, they still can't go out together, look at
Yeah.
each other lustfully, mention certain things about each other. Whereas, for example, if they're under this particular contract, they are able to do so with the limitations set out in the contract. However, unfortunately, it's been abused by certain men who are married, and the moment they have issues with their wives, all of a sudden they go in secret and find what? Find others in which they establish a temporary marriage. And that really breaks down family setups. It breaks down marriages. It shows a lack of trust that people will feel, the wives will feel, cheated upon. Although they're not necessarily doing something haram per se if they're marrying a person who is Muslim, but not appropriate in certainly in today's setups, especially in the Western world.
Sent him. And just prior, you mentioned widows. Widows need to be married and whatnot. That's another point for the marriage and death. I'm telling you guys, the more this episode goes on, the more these are actually very related topics. Although it's not very gleeful. I apologize. But
It's not only widows, by the way, divorcees. There are people in our communities at the moment who are suffering. A few years ago, I did a online poll asking the sisters who are in their 30s and their 40s who are not married why they're not married. Because there's a stigma in many of these communities. Because the moment they reach 35, 36, some of the brothers who are in their 30s will only take girls or will choose a girl that's in their 20s.
yeah,
and some of them feel like, they're being left, nobody's thinking about them when they're in their 30s and their 40s. So our communities need to look at this because there's a rising number. I don't know, I'm sure in Toronto that's the case.
Yeah.
In Canada, it is the case. In the UK, in the Western world generally, those who are divorced. I mean, you know what? Divorce happens. People are not compatible. Why is it then that there is a stigma on them? Oh, I don't want to marry her because she's somebody who's divorced, for example. Those who have kids, maybe one kid, two kids, and they want to get married, but they don't have the facilities to do so. And likewise, the widows. So there has to be some platform or some kind of process in which these individuals are not neglected and they are given an
They're not
opportunity
swept
as
to the
well
side. Yeah.
to live a happy life and to find the right partner.
Ahsantum. So now let's set up a scenario. You find the one, you get married, everything's great, her parents are great, you agree on everything, you love each other, keda keda, you live a few years, and then he or she dies. They die. It's something that happens. Yani the pandemic showed us this. Many young people, old people, it was had no it didn't distinguish. Yani it just chose someone and they passed away.
Mm.
But ila rahmatillah, they've now passed away, and you are left as a young widower or widow. There's so many questions that now can be, posed, and a lot of people have these questions because it's not something you typically talk about. It's considered a bit taboo. Yani, how long until you can? For a man, it seems like you're expected to move on fairly quickly. You find someone else, and yalla, she died. And visit her grave once a year. اقرأ لها الفاتحة and call it a day. But for women, no, they have to mourn for years and years. And then, like you mentioned, widows are neglected often. يعني, why marry a widow? Oh, you can find someone who's never been married. مثلا. Then there's more questions. If they have kids, what happens to the kids? What happens to the kids when you remarry and you have more kids? It becomes a fiqhi matter. We need to have a whole crash course on this.
That's right.
Inshallah. But just back to that main point about the man, the woman in their different situations, if that was to happen, what advice would you give them? What is there to learn from Ahlul Bayt, from the teachings of Ahlul Bayt about this kind of situation? Well, Imam Ali, Sayeda Fatimah passed away and she was still very young. They had very young children.
That's right.
And he moved on. So that's just one example. What can we learn about that?
For sure. First of all, I think it's important for us to understand the fiqhi connotations to that because it's once again subject to misconceptions. The female that loses her husband has to go through a idda period, a waiting period of 4 months and 10 days. And in this time, she's not supposed to present herself in a way that's attractive to others, but it doesn't mean that she can't go out. Because I've received so many questions from people saying, you know what, my mother is not leaving the house for this period of time because she's told you're not allowed to leave the house. This is prison. If she goes out in a respectful way, hijab, for example, not in a way that's drawing attention deliberately of men, there is no problem in doing so. That's the whole point of the iddah, that she's mourning the death of her husband, for example. The advice that we would give is, first of all, people will struggle to answer the question why. Why is Allah taking my husband when he's in his 20s or 30s or young? So there is a theological struggle and they need a lot of support. It's very important that they speak to a scholar or a learned individual so that they make sense of what's happening and why these things happen as much as possible, so that they can be boosted, the iman can be strengthened, so they don't begin to question God or be angry with God, God forbid, for example. That's the first area, so that they begin to somehow make sense of it all as much as possible. The second area, I think, is to get as much support from family members, from friends, to understand that this is not easy, that it may take them time. But like I said, it's so important that we learn from examples such as Imam Al-Hasan alayhi salam. He was married to this lady, Ishaq. Now, Ishaq, she gave him a number of children, including Fatima, who is the wife of Imam al-Sajjad. Now, what happens is Imam al-Hassan, in his deathbed, in his wasiyah, says to his brother Imam al-Hussein, alayhi salam, he says to him, when I die and the waiting period ends, marry my wife Ishaq, because she's beloved to me. So I would entrust her to you. And he does. And Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam marries Ishaq. Right? So ultimately, sometimes, we learn from the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam that these individuals, they shouldn't be abandoned, neither should they be then exploited or abused for the fact that, you know what, you're a widow, you'll never get permanently married, so let's just offer other alternatives for these individuals. I feel that in our communities, there are many who may not necessarily favorably look at these particular examples, but we've got to change mindsets and worldviews and how people look at this by encouraging awareness and education from a young age that it's okay. A widow hasn't done anything wrong. She should be also considered for marriage like anyone else.
Sent him. Now, it's going to sound funny, but I'm sure this crosses many people's minds. So you have your first spouse, they pass away, then you get married again, and then you both pass away. So who's with you in Jannah?
We'll have to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I have no idea. Of course, Jannah, you see the creation. The Jannah is a fascinating topic. I love talking about paradise. And I think, one of the things we have to do when it comes to our children and education and tarbiyah, and we were having this conversation earlier about how to present Islam to our children and so on, is paradise is such a key concept that I don't feel is talked about enough and explained enough and detailed enough to people. Like sometimes when I go to schools and I speak to kids, Muslim schools, I tell them, tell me about Jannah, what do you know? So they start, the child's imagination is huge. They'll start saying, you know what, there's nice birds.
Unlimited ice cream.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, that's just me.
Well, I give them sometimes descriptions which makes their kind of, even I could see their excitement. I say to them, you can have palaces made out of Nutella, for example.
Ya Allah.
Yes. You can have rivers of milkshake, or rivers of milk and people like me standing next to it. No, that's a bit dry, milkshake. So then you can have anything that you want in paradise. But the key thing I think with most people when it comes to understanding akhirah is that Jahannam is being pushed down the minds and in their throats so much that they don't even think about paradise. And I told this to kids. I said, listen, go back to your room, take a piece of paper and write on it paradise and stick it on the wall. Someone said to me, what is that? Remind yourself, it's okay. It's okay to be motivated to go there. And I said to them, okay, how much of the day do you have to worship? So some of them are like, oh, you still have to wake up for Fajr. I said, you don't have to. You don't have to study. You don't have to work. So they said 24/7 chilling and relaxing combined. I said, yes. They're like, for how long? I asked them, how long? They said, I don't know, 500 trillion years. I said, no, forever. The moment you enter paradise, you never leave. And all you do is have fun. So is it worth sacrificing your life in a negative sense to avoid or to then end up not in Jannah? It's worth doing whatever we can to get to it. So people, especially kids, will be indeed motivated, and the list of bounties are endless. Especially being able to, inshallah, be in the presence of the best and the choicest and the greatest of human beings, Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawatullahi wa salam alayhi.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Ahsantum. So we're about to wrap up. We're at time. There's so many more questions. It's one leads to another. But there's one actually I wanted to get to earlier. This is off topic. As someone who you produce a lot of reels talking about fiqhi matters and ahkam based on the opinions of Sayyid Sistani, correct? Specifically with Samahati Sayyid, I find that there's a lot of maybe conflicting answers. and like you don't know which authority to take from. You know what I mean? Like Sistani.org doesn't answer everything.
Right.
And so there are some organizations that have taken it up to answer questions based on the opinions of the Sayyid. What happens when those conflict? Or those conflict with the website? Or they conflict with each other? Yani, I
So,
find,
yeah,
Afwan, but
Afwan.
specifically Sayyid Sistani, it's difficult because, of course, he has the largest following and he has probably the broadest network of representatives, across the world.
Yeah.
So it's just difficult to get a straight answer.
First of all, what an honor and a privilege it is for us to have a man like His Eminence Ayatollah Al-Udma Sayyid Ali Al-Hussein
May
Al-Sistani,
Allah prolong his
Hafidhahullah,
life.
a brilliant, exceptional human being that I've had the honor to meet many, many times across the last few years. And every time I meet him, I'm inspired by his humility, by his devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by his dedication to the faith. And I think obviously fiqh plays a pivotal role in the lives of many people. I understand that people look at fiqh in a negative sense sometimes. They think, oh man, this is a bit boring, or it's too technical, or it's too much for me. But it is essential for us to understand
As a law
and to
student, I
apply.
love fiqh. It's like my
Yeah.
bread and butter.
But it's not for many people their own kind of bedtime reading, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the whole idea is to make it simple for people to understand, and that was partly the reason why the reels were done. Incidentally, I try to include the opinions of other Maraji as much as I possibly can, but sometimes in a minute it's difficult. But yes, it's mainly focused on the opinions of His Eminence Ayatollah Sistani because many of the people may be following him, so it's for that. Is there really some kind of inconsistency or different answers? I think it's possible based on people who may have answered incorrectly thinking that that's the answer. But from the official channels, you will not find, for example, a contradictory answer on sistani.org within the website itself. So, what has to happen? I think if somebody gets an answer and finds a different one somewhere else, is where the role of the scholar comes in. A scholar who is well equipped with jurisprudential rulings and is able to look at the original sources, and if not, contact, for example, the representatives, the wukala of the marja, or his office in Najaf to get clarity. And that's okay. For example, in Hajj and Umrah is one of the most complex series of rulings. And sometimes you need that kind of direction or specific guidelines from the office itself. And so, if anybody out there finds any rulings that do not necessarily match, don't just say, oh, well, I'll take one of them. Definitely get in touch. It is not necessarily always 100% accurate, everything. The whole goal is to provide and facilitate the answers in the best possible way. In this day and age, people are thinking about AI and how to use AI to provide the answers, fiqh answers to people in the right way. AI is not to be trusted at the moment to provide that. It's not accurate at all,
Definitely.
right? Different tools are being used out there. We still have to be careful because this is about halal and haram. And until we get it absolutely right, then we can maybe advise people to utilize it for the rulings. But for sure, I think people's help is needed. Sometimes if you find something which doesn't make sense, get in touch or ask a scholar so that they can get in touch with the mu'mineen leading, for example, a particular marja''s website so that they can clarify it or actually, if there is a mistake, correct it.
I just wanted to clear that up. But a funny aside about AI is it's the same thing in the legal field where AI was caught making up. Like, I can't lie, I've used ChatGPT before. Hopefully no one from university sees this. But it was caught making up cases. Like, it would just make up law itself. So it would say,
It's not a real
it would
case.
cite a case like,
Yeah.
Roy versus whoever, and a year and a citation. تدخل عليه, it's like a Supreme Court case على أساس. And تدخل عليه, there's nothing. There's non-existent.
Well, I know AI has a long, it's still got a long way to go when it comes to Islamic teachings. ChatGPT has been used by some people to answer questions that I have been posting on the app daily.
Yeah.
So they've been sending me, for example, I had a question yesterday or day before, who is the mother of Imam Al-Askari alayhi salam. And the choices that were there are Halima, Hakima, Habiba, and Hudayth. So the name of the mother is Hudayth. But ChatGPT was telling people is Hakima. So it's not getting it right.
That's the sister, no?
Yeah, so no, Hakima is basically the daughter of Imam Al-Jawad, who is the sister of Imam Al-Hadi.
Sister of Imam Al-Hadi.
Yes, so she's the aunt of Imam Al-Askari and Imam Al-Mahdi Ajjallahu ta'ala farajah. And so she's not the mother of Imam Al-Askari alayhi salam. So this is just an example that AI has a long way to go still. But maybe one day it might catch up if we provide it with as much correct information as we possibly can.
Inshallah. So we've touched on a lot of topics. Talked about, online. We talked about the app. We've talked about marriage and death. Very interesting. Very interesting coalescence of topics.
That's right.
But thank you so much, Samahat al-Sheikh, for your time, for your answers. I think we've tired you out tonight between Majlis,
absolute pleasure, absolute
Q&A,
pleasure.
and podcast. But you're still spry and you're ready to answer questions.
Alhamdulillah, it's a great pleasure to be here in Toronto in Masjid Al-Rasool Al-A'zam with the Al-Rasool youth. MashaAllah, they are wonderful, hardworking, excellent in the media department. Their AV and their media productions are top, mashallah. A example for many organizations to follow, and I genuinely believe this is the way forward. If we were to lead the world in digital technology and dissemination of the knowledge, but in an effective, powerful way, we need to have the best tools and the best designers and the best video editors, etc. So inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses you and all the mu'mineen, the shabab who are working hard to serve the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam.
Taban, the editor is smiling ear to ear, just back there.
He hasn't told me to say this, by the way. I'm just saying it by myself.
Listen, I plug Noor Islamic Education, you plug our AV.
You scratch my back, I scratch yours. Khalas, that's it. That's how it works.
That's how it works. Thank you so much, Sheikh. It's been our honor to have you, someone as knowledgeable as you to learn from you. Inshallah, we can, as they say, run it back again.
Inshallah ta'ala. Jazakumullah khairan.
Thank you so much. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi.